Denise's invitation for everybody to dance as they're coming forward today makes me think of the Ellen talk show. Coming soon to a church near you. Sorry, doom mode. A headline from The Guardian's international news website this past Monday. Texas pediatrician no longer employed after post about pro-Trump flood victims. Physician made a post wishing that MAGA supporters in Kerr County get what they voted for amid flash flooding. Anyone else see this story last weekend amid the news coverage of the flash floods in Texas that killed over 100 people? Apparently, when the floods first hit, a well-respected physician in Houston made a post on social media. May all visitors, children, non-MAGA voters, and pets be safe and dry, said the post, which invoked an acronym for Trump's Make America Great Again slogan. Kerr County MAGA voted to gut FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They deny climate change. May they get what they voted for. The post concluded with the phrase, bless their hearts, which in the U.S. South is often used as a condescending insult. Ouch. Floodwaters were still rising. News reports of a significant number of people dead and missing, and the response of this professional healthcare provider is anger, self-righteousness, contempt, and sarcasm. Where does that kind of hostility come from? Of course, she was not alone. The CBC radio report I heard on Monday morning featured a clip from one of the local mayors asking people to pause their demands for answers about why the disaster hadn't been foreseen or prevented. He was basically pleading for people to give his office time and space to do the work of rescue and recovery before they moved on to investigating what had gone wrong. Which feels like it should go without saying. Responding to the crisis in progress is obviously the priority. But apparently some people needed someone to blame. And as you could have guessed, there was plenty of finger-pointing to go around across the political spectrum. Apparently some folks are very convinced that weather manipulation, whatever that is, caused the flooding. Either corporate cloud seeding attempt gone wrong or a government conspiracy of the deep state acting against the current US president. I wish I was making this up. None of those are what I would call rational responses to a very real tragedy. Something bad happens, the nervous system fills with stress and tension. The rational parts of our brains are overloaded and disregarded, and we give these emotional gut reactions that are not always helpful or healthy, to put it mildly. And it spirals outward from there. Impulsive reaction leads to further impulsive reactions. The employer fires an otherwise excellent doctor rather than making space for people to be human, to make mistakes. The news breathlessly reports on these side dramas right alongside actual news about the tragedy. And I get sucked in and keep clicking on these stories from 2,000 miles away because they somehow validate my worldview and they distract me from the dirty dishes on the counter. How do you respond to doom, collective or personal? How do you respond, and is that how you want to respond? And what are these responses telling us about ourselves and about our world? This summer we are talking about doom through the lens of the climate crisis and its effects across human society. What does it mean to be faithful in times of crisis? Whether that is the collective doom like the changing climate or a personal doom of any kind of loss. I'm drawing inspiration and structure for this series from Brian McLaren's book, Life After Doom, Wisdom and Courage for a World Falling Apart. If you would like to dive a bit deeper into the climate change conversation, you can join me here, and we'll meet out there tomorrow evening. We will be talking through 4 possible scenarios that McLaren describes for the future of humanity, from the best case, collapse avoidance, to the worst case, collapse extinction. A summary of those 4 was sent out with the congregational emails yesterday, or Friday and Tuesday. If you want to look back on those, you can read further there. Anyone is welcome to join this conversation tomorrow at 7 o'clock here. It's definitely not a book club. Advanced reading is not required. We're just talking about what we know and about what we don't know. How are you doing with that on the screen? How does it feel to read those scenarios about the possibilities of doom? These are not mere hypotheticals. These are drawn from the work of the most well-established, well-respected climate scientists. There's plenty that we don't know and can't predict, but these are well within the range of possibility. How do you feel about that? Collapse avoidance. Humanity makes critical changes on an urgent timeline to prevent the worst climate catastrophes, though the long-term costs and the collateral damage are still significant. There's collapse rebirth. Ecological breakdown and the resulting societal chaos wreak havoc on human civilization. Some technological knowledge and social cohesion remain, allowing communities to slowly rebuild in the aftermath. Then there's collapse survival. The global environment continues to deteriorate. Most of the cultural and technological developments of civilization are lost, and human survivors exist in a Stone Age dystopia. And collapse extinction. Escalating ecological breakdown prompts desperate human reactions like nuclear or biological war, and the destruction results in the near total extinction of humanity and significant losses to other species on land and sea. How do you feel? What emotions can you name as we read those? Where do you feel it in your body? I'm feeling the tightness. Maybe there's a twinge in your gut, elevated heart rate, some uncomfortable shifting happening out there. You're feeling the urge to move. What's going on within you? I'm honestly not trying to provoke you or move you in any particular direction. There's no right or wrong way to feel about this, no judgment. Just encouraging you to pay attention, to feel the feelings, pay attention to what they're saying to you. Last Sunday, I said that faithfulness in times of doom begins by refusing to look away, by paying attention to doom, even when it's hard. The next challenge is to focus that attention within ourselves, to allow what we see in here to transform us. We prayed the serenity prayer repeatedly last week. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This dance between accepting what I can't change and changing the things I can, that is the path of transformation. Not transformation of the situation, the world around me, but this inner transformation, how I react and respond and am present in this world of which I am a part. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you can figure out what God's will is, what is good and pleasing and mature. Renewing your mind, bringing your actions, reactions, and responses into line with the greater good, what the Apostle Paul calls the will of God. It's easy to meet doom with our reactions. It's far more difficult, far more worthwhile to hold and shape those reactions into a constructive response with intention and purpose. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Jonah is held up as an example of how not to be faithful in difficult times. You know the story, but you might be surprised at the wide ranges of emotional responses in the story. It begins with denial. Get up and go to Nineveh, God said to Jonah. Oh, no thank you, Jonah replied. Nope, not happening. He bought a ticket to literally the other end of the known world and boarded the boat. When the storm hit, the crew of the ship reacted in terror, screaming to their gods, throwing valuable cargo into the sea, anything to lighten the ship. But Jonah didn't even notice. He was below decks, sleeping through the storm. Was he exhausted, overwhelmed, or numbed to the situation? Was his nap an intentional attempt to distract himself? Or was it psychological overload, shutdown, disassociation? The frantic soldiers woke Jonah up and urged him to join in their desperate prayers. In their desperation, they cast lots. They drew straws to see whose fate had caused the storm. Call it superstition, call it bargaining, call it magical thinking. They placed the blame on Jonah when his number came up. And Jonah took it. He accepted the responsibility. Sorry, just defying creator over here, my bad. Deserved or not, Jonah threw himself up. He made himself a martyr. Throw me into the sea and the storm will stop. It's the only way. So eventually they did. They tossed Jonah overboard, and the storm did stop, and the sea calmed. As he sank into the depths, the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. In the belly of the fish, Jonah turned to writing poetry, as one does in such a setting. I called out to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. From the belly of the underworld, I cried out for help. You have heard my voice. Waters have grasped me to the point of death. The deep surrounds me. Seaweed is wrapped around my head. At the base of the undersea mountains, I have sunk down to the underworld. Its bars held me with no end in sight. But you brought me out of the pit. I will offer a sacrifice to you with a voice of thanks. That which I have promised I will pay. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. That's just part of it. It's quite the roller coaster of a poem, from determination to delusion to grief to gratitude. And then, miracle of miracles, the fish vomited Jonah onto the shore, and God again directs him, go to Nineveh. This time Jonah accepts the call and goes straight to the big city. The message God had given the prophet to deliver was not good news. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Nineveh was the enemy of Israel, so a foreign prophet walking into a city to declare their imminent destruction would not have gone over so well. No wonder Jonah had been scared before. But now, post-regurgitation, he is preaching with self-assured vigor. And amazingly, his prophecy worked. The king of Nineveh heard the prophet and believed the warning. He recognized the wickedness in himself and his city. The story is light on specifics, but he changed course, repentance, sackcloth and ashes, the whole deal. And God also changed course and revoked the prophecy. But now Jonah was angry. I knew it. I knew you would be merciful and patient with them, but they're the enemy. Destroy them. They deserve it. So Jonah went outside the city to pout, to watch if God would change his mind again in the way that Jonah wanted. And it was hot, it was dry, and Jonah was miserable, but he was committed to his self-righteous defiance. And then the shrub grew up beside Jonah. A shrub came and stretched over him to give him a bit of shade. Finally, things are going his way. But no, the shrub soon withered and died just as quickly as it had grown. And Jonah was again angry, so angry he wanted to die, so convinced that his anger was justified. And the story ends with God lecturing Jonah for caring more about this solitary plant than for the whole city of Nineveh. It's a lot of emotion for just 4 chapters. Some of us are having feelings about those feelings, and they're not even ours. But that's a pretty common experience of doom in the modern age. My brain has way too many tabs open, 4 of them are frozen, and I have no idea where the music is coming from. Yep, pretty much. A whole lot of us are walking around with this kind of emotional confusion and weight on our shoulders. Some of that is natural response. It's our emotions doing what they're supposed to do in response to day-to-day interactions and relationships and the news that we hear all the time. Some of it is empathy. Again, this is this natural response, but it's now supercharged because of the 24/7 news reality, where I feel sorrow and pain and fear along with these strangers facing floods in Texas, which is fine. It's human. It's a good response. But at the same time, I'm also carrying sorrow and fear and pain for those in Gaza, the Sudan, in Boval, and more. It all matters, absolutely, but giving those things my time and my attention, letting those things influence my emotions, that comes at a cost. And further, more cynically, some of those emotions that we carry are manufactured to keep our attention, to win our political support, sometimes just to wear us down and keep us confused, and especially to get us to spend money. All of that adds up. If you're feeling tired or numb or overwhelmed or depressed, yeah, of course you are. That's legit. That is not weakness on your part. This is the story that we find ourselves in. That is still ours to deal with, but I feel a little bit better naming it as a shared reality. So cut yourself some slack. Cut the people around you some slack. This feels hard because it is hard. Life is relentless these days. The other piece of this is that all of this is actually useful information. All of these feelings along the way were trying to tell Jonah something, to signal danger, to physiological overload, to point out strained relationships, to show him his personal inconsistency, to spur him to action, all of these kinds of things. And Jonah just missed all of it. He just plowed right through it all without learning anything, without taking the opportunity to recognize and break an unhealthy pattern, without allowing one experience to recognize and to shape and color the next. I mean, how does a guy who gets the ultimate second chance, rescued and regurgitated by a giant fish, how does that guy get mad when God gives someone else a second chance, for example? Jonah is all reaction and no reflection. I mean, the poem in the belly of the whale was a good start, but didn't land. There's no renewal. There's no transformation. Again, the invitation today is to follow your feelings, to sit with them in intention and purpose, to allow them to shape our reactions into a constructive response, especially in a season of doom when all the emotions and reactions are cranked to 11. Brian McLaren calls this process minding your mind. He points out that the emotional overload that comes with the doom of the climate crisis tends to push us in two directions. On the one hand, we lean towards unrealistic optimism. Those are just feelings. It's all going to work out. All things work together for good, am I right? Perhaps you felt that when we read those 4 scenarios. I mean, it can't be that bad. It's probably going to be the first one, right? Or we lean in the opposite direction. It's all too much for me. I can't possibly do anything about this. We're screwed. Both optimism and pessimism, when they're allowed to steer the ship, bring us to complacency. Here's McLaren. That's why one of my mantras for life after doom is mind your mind. Pay attention not only to external evidence, but also to the subjective internal dynamics that are constantly influencing your perspective as you evaluate and interpret that evidence. When I say mind your mind, I don't just mean your rational processes. Instead, I mean your whole nervous system, the hardware on which the software of your consciousness runs. It includes the brain, but really it is much larger, comprising the network of nerves that extends through and is integrated with the whole human body. One thing we know about our nervous system, it is far more complicated than we understand. That's why we reach for metaphors, each of which is admittedly limited and imperfect to help us understand the system by which we understand. McLaren uses the metaphor of a board of directors with 3 subcommittees. There's the survival committee, the belonging committee, and the meaning committee. Chapter 3 of the book goes into fascinating detail of the psychology of these committees and how they negotiate among themselves to process information, how they work together to make decisions or work against each other trying to get their own way, how they create stories to explain decisions after they are made. These internal systems are not as organized and signal-minded as we might like to imagine. There are competing interests, there are shouting matches and power struggles. When I think in this way of the internal board of directors, I am not so surprised by all the turmoil and conflict I feel as I dance with doom. In fact, I'm quite amazed at how well I and we are managing to get through another day. To mind my mind is to be aware of what is going on inside me. To mind my mind is to seek to integrate my committees and all their subcommittees and members in the healthiest ways I can, so I don't jump to premature closure, whether optimistic or despondent. To mind my mind also means realizing that my part of the reality I'm waking up to and welcoming, that my mind is part of the reality that I'm waking up to and welcoming, and it is the means by which I access that reality. Important work indeed. That's why we're starting here with this internal work. Our mind, which includes the rational and emotional and relational and spiritual, My mind is the gateway. It's the means by which I access everything else. If we're not seeing clearly, if we're not responding out of a place of health, everything else is going to be shaped by that. We don't all need to be neuroscientists or psychologists, but paying attention to what's going on inside is critical to transformation. Mind your mind. That can look like a lot of different things. One part might be self-discipline. Are the inputs that stir up all these emotions in me, the news, the social media, the water cooler conversations, are those healthy and helpful? Do I choose them? It is good to be informed, but maybe I don't actually need to read and watch stories about flooding 2,000 miles away. Maybe I could be more intentional about setting up specific times and ways to consume the news. Maybe I can turn off alerts and notifications on my phone, delete the apps that keep me activated without reflection. Maybe I don't need to engage in so many debates with that guy at work. We're not changing each other's minds anyway. Another part of it could be self-expression. Many emotions are prompts to do something. So do it. Meet it with creativity. Write, paint, craft, build, make music, whatever makes space for you to feel the feelings and gives them somewhere to land. You know this already. Perhaps framing this as an intentional response to doom will give you and me the permission to make the time and effort to practice what we actually already know. Speaking of practice, our faith tradition has plenty of other tools for this kind of inner work. You're doing it right now. Corporate worship is a form of contemplation. Prayer as well, as individuals or in groups. Meditation with Scripture, community, sharing and caring, speaking honestly and vulnerably with each other, serving together. Anything that builds community is vital to prepare myself for the doom that is coming for us. It's been a while since I've plugged the practice of spiritual direction, so let me remind you that the church has money set aside in our budget to help people to access spiritual direction. If you'd like to try it out and you look at the cost and like, $75 or whatever is a little too much to just try it, come talk to me. We will find you somebody and we will find a way to pay for it. We have a way to pay for it. Spiritual direction has been extremely helpful to me in processing my existential crises around climate doom. I come with all of these emotions and my director listens, reminds me to pay attention, helps me to find God in the middle of that storm. Most of you are already doing these kinds of things, so just connect the dots, make it intentional. My spirituality is part of my response to a changing climate and collective doom. What you're doing might not need to change a whole lot, but framing it that way can help us to resist that creeping complacency. It's bad, but I am doing something. I already am doing work that matters within myself and around me. Or maybe you want to start and add some kind of intentional practice to your life. McLaren suggests practicing the focus and release of meditation. Again, this is familiar, whether we call it centering prayer or deep thought or mindfulness. In your practice, you let your thoughts go where they will. Let them come and go without trying to control them. But at the same time, you've got a central focal point of some kind, a word or an image or your breath, and you just keep practicing bringing your focus, your attention back to this central point. So you're doing this dance of letting things be what they are, and yet I keep coming back to who I am, to where I am, to what the core is. That just builds a muscle that is really helpful with all of this stuff in the distracting and overwhelming world. As Richard Rohr puts it, contemplation is meeting all the reality you can bear, a long, loving look at the real. There's so much space in that description. Permission to not take on more than you can handle, permission to let things be, and again, that in and out, to set the parameters, to bring the intention of love to whatever it is that you're feeling. Romans 12 again, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds so that you can figure out what God's will is, what is good and pleasing and mature. I usually think about God's will as this external thing. It's God's plan. It's thy kingdom come. It's some kind of path that I'm meant to follow. But here, this whole section is second person plural. You, brothers and sisters, present your bodies. What's going on inside of you? God's will here. What is good and acceptable and whole, that is within you. That's not something that you need to work at to become. This is already who you are. God's beloved, the masterpiece of the master creator, the very image of God, the Spirit of God living in you. This transformation isn't about somehow living up to all of that. This transformation is remembering, coming back to it, renewing, being who you are from the very beginning. And God saw everything that God had made, and it was very good. That is God's will for you, to the end and beyond. So that's at the core of this paying attention, minding your mind. Remember who you are. Remember who we are together in light of the Creator who made us. May it be.